Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. It's time once again for another one of our Forever Friends segments, and I gotta just tell you again how grateful I am for the opportunity to do this segment. I fear, given there's so much nostalgia and given that it means so much more to me than it does to you, I fear that you may not be enjoying these segments, but I gotta tell you, I'm really enjoying doing them, in part because it just gives me the opportunity to think back and to remember, and, well, as the point, to give thanks. Well, today I'd like to give thanks for a forever friend whose name is Michael Branson. Now, the first time I ever met Michael Branson, he ended up accidentally putting a fairly significant stain on my living room carpet. And yet, even that was a moment that made him profoundly endearing to me. Here's the context. When I started Highlands Ministries, originally the Highlands Study Center, when I started it, the first thing that I did was advertise that I was hosting a Bible study in my home. And that very, very first Bible study, the very first public event for Highlands Ministries, Michael Branson showed up. And he showed up, and he literally sat at my feet. I was in the big chair that used to be my father's chair that I still have. The ottoman is right across the desk from me. It's the ottoman on which Lisa sits when we record together. I was sitting in that chair and teaching on the book of Joshua, and Michael sat there on the ground. The reason the stain happened, though, was because Michael, I think, maybe this was just normal, but I think he was trying to, dress for the occasion. So he took the time to polish his army boots. And unfortunately, not all the polish came off. And that's what ended up on the carpet. Michael had served in the military before I met him, and he served in the military later in life. And he ended up being the first man that I married. Now, by marrying in this context, if it's not clear, I performed the ceremony. He and I were not wed together, but Michael was the very first wedding that I did to his wonderful wife, who was also at that original Bible study. And Michael just became a friend, and he continued to sit there and listen. And he actually encouraged me profoundly with his listening in these studies, because to this day, I mean, literally, when I'm out there at Ivy Tech Community College teaching in this secular college, I talk about Michael because I always give out the Michael Branson Award, and I explain why and what that means. The Michael Branson Award is given to someone whose question is answered by the next point in my notes. Because that's what Michael would do all the time. I'd be talking about this or that, and Michael would raise his hand, and I'd say, "What is it, Michael?" And he would ask this question, and I would say, "Michael," I would show him my notes. I said, "Do you see the point that I just made?" He said, "Yes." I said, "What's the point right after that?" And he'd read it and say, "That's the answer to my question." I'd say, "Man, you are really tracking with where I'm trying to go here. This is you're paying attention." And not only are you paying attention, but you're thinking it through so that you can see what the next question is that what's coming. And there's the answer. And he just did that so often that I would, again, use it to praise students yet to this day. I mean, this was mercy. This was more than 25 years ago that this was happening. Michael married Tara, and They currently, I believe, live in the Kansas City area. That the last time that I saw any of them was when I was speaking in Kansas City. There's a whole clan there, 3 homeschooled daughters. He married the oldest, and this whole crew was a part of the founding original charter members of St. Peter Presbyterian Church. Now, Michael was just not only a good student, but he was also a lot of fun. He was willing to go all in. He would show up sometimes and play cards with us at the home. He was has a great sense of humor. He was he is a diligent man. He was an encouragement to me as I'm starting out in ministry, in just so many, many ways. Oh, I got to tell you this too. He probably also, along with Tara, they gave me the greatest scare of my life. One time, family went on a trip, and Michael and Tara house sat for us, and dog sat for us, and when I got home from that particular trip, it was late at night, and after unloading the car, I decided I should go down to my office and check on something online probably. And I went down the stairs into the basement, and it was dark. And again, I'm really sleepy, and I open the door to my office, and there's this shadow of this 7-foot tall man right in front of me. I screamed like a little girl. I mean, I yelped and grabbed for a light switch and turned it on, and there was a gift from Michael and Tara. They had secured a more than life-size cardboard cutout of William Wallace from the movie Braveheart and set it there. Well, again, I'm just so grateful for how God blessed me with a friend like Michael, as well as his precious wife and her family. I ask that God continue to bless them. And as always, I think I'm going to be able to track him down and make sure he gets a chance to hear this. But let me again encourage you to do the same. It doesn't have to be a podcast, but find a way. Send an email, send a message on social media, find an old friend, maybe someone you haven't talked to in a while, and just let them know that you not only appreciate what they were to you, but that you continue to think about them and to thank God for them, just as I feel about Michael Branson. What do I think about head coverings? It's covered in 1 Corinthians 11. And second question, what is meant by because of the angels? Well, with respect to head coverings, I'm for them. Here are just a few thoughts on the matter. First, I am more than happy to concede that men of good will differ on this issue. Second, I'm also happy to boldly suggest that virtually every Christian from the time of Paul's epistle to less than 100 years ago agrees with me on this issue. As my father has asked, what potent interpretive insight did the church miss all those centuries? Isn't it telling that this changed with the rise of the feminist movement? Third, one thing I'm certain of. Having our wives cover their heads at corporate worship is certainly not a sin. Failing to do so may be a sin. By resistless Pascalian logic, that means the choice should be obvious. Fourth, I'm highly skeptical of the her hair is the covering argument. It strikes me that if that were the case, Paul wouldn't have had to say anything. I'm the first to concede that the Corinthian church was a mess. But I don't suspect there was a strong husbands with bald-headed women contingent there needing to be rebuked. Fifth, please note the grammar that I've been using. This is an issue for husbands, not wives. That is, no man will be able to stand before the throne of God, and when God asks why the man's wife worshipped uncovered, the man can never say, "Yeah, what about that? Why don't we get her in here?" Wives, that means that if your husband doesn't want you to cover, covering is a sin. Sixth, I really don't like to make a big deal about this. It is, I understand, an unusual perspective in our day, but I don't want to make it something that I become a champion of. I don't want to look down my nose at people who take the other view, and I don't want them looking down their nose at me. I don't think we should be taking sides or keeping score. Typically, when I'm asked about this question in person, I respond something like this. I'm willing to answer your question as long as you understand that I'll probably commit a more grave sin during the time it takes me to answer your question than people commit by not being right on the issue. That is, there are a million things for us to worry about before we worry about this. There's a million weaknesses that we all struggle against before we need to devote a great deal of time and attention to this issue. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It's in God's Word, and so it matters. I am saying other things matter more. Given that, you might be wondering, okay, RC, if that's the case, if it's not that important, if you're not eager to get into debates about it and argue about it, why in the world did you bother to answer it? That's a great question. I bothered to answer this first question, what do I think about head coverings, so I could get to the second part of the question. What is meant there in 1 Corinthians 11 by the expression, because of the angels? What is Paul talking about here? And I wanted to get to this question because this is one of those times when I get the opportunity to give the most wise answer I could ever give. What is meant by because of the angels? I don't know. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.